Hey everybody, this is Craig and I'm here with Troy and Jonathan. Great to see you both again.
Good to see you again, Craig.
Good to see you, Craig.
Hey, I'd love to hear a little bit of both of your individual backgrounds for a couple of minutes, and then we'll jump into the exciting things that you're doing at the moment. So why don't you share your background, each of you?
I'll let Jonathan start.
Sure. I work in what we call our solution strategy team, which is basically a team that has to know a lot about the technology, how we've used it, how we can use it, and help organizations align it to what they're trying to do in a business sense. And my background in work is a mixture of technology for a couple of decades and a bit of marketing and communications and economic development in the past. So that's my background overall.
Yep. So I've been doing the IT thing since I was probably in my early 30s, so that's quite a while. My focus is part of the team in solution strategy. The things that I'm most passionate about is solving everyday problems with technology, and I have a definite penchant for low-code solutions or solutions that don't require too much of a developer twist. Love developers and allow and empower people to actually do more with less.
Fantastic. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the company that you're both working with.
Well, Fusion 5 has been around for over 15 years. They're a solutions or a system integration partner. We basically help customers realize the benefit out of the software they need for their core business applications, anything from ERP, modern work solutions, security, I might be getting something, customer services. That's our core area. So we're really focused on customer outcomes. That's what we do. Our team specifically is focused on making sure that the technology fit matches the customer requirements and isn't future-proof, but at least is considering what's on the roadmap over the next 2 to 3 years in technology.
And Fusion 5 we were actually founded in Wellington by a group of 5 people, then 4, and they've grown over the years to now, I think, around 800 people across New Zealand and Australia. So it's pretty sizable, but flying under the radar sometimes company in New Zealand. And it is still locally owned, proudly New Zealand and Australia company.
Right. And so could you tell us about some of those problems that companies or organizations face, and AI might provide a solution, and some of the tools you might be using?
Yep. Do you want to go?
Okay, sure. Actually, some of the ways that we find problems are we start fixing things that we also find to be a problem. So that's one way that we're approaching some of these matters with AI tools right now. But one of the things, if I start with just a use case that I'm using it for right now, it's made search so much easier for me. Like searching for information, finding information, and getting a summary of information. And this could be things like, 3 examples or a couple of examples. Finding a file that I worked on with Troy and someone else about 6 months ago for a specific event. I knew the file probably didn't have a very user-friendly name. I knew the event that we attended, but I knew nothing about where the file was. And it just, the level that you get from search nowadays just saves so much time. And then another example of that was asking it to summarize all the dealings that we'd had with a particular customer. So really easy to get that kind of information out. So you look across all our documents and all our history and records and just give me a brief summary of what we've done with this organization. So yeah, that's saving me a lot of time. That's problems that I deal with.
We're lucky to be on the evolution of generative AI, and I think that a lot of us for the last 18 months realize there's a place you can go to and you type in a few instructions and you get some input out of it. And the benefit we're seeing with customers is grounding that information on their data. So you have generative AI's capability of being able to reason across content and generate a response. If you take a ChatGPT in its native form, it's going to reason across what it's learned. And where we find the application works really well is when we fine-tune that reasoning and say, this is your data set, this is your intent, this is your purpose, or this is your output, match that, but only get the data from the source. And that takes away that, I guess, the urban myth that AI is terrible and gets things wrong all the time. It gets things right based on what it knows. And by grounding it, we get a lot of value out of it. Some of the customer solutions, I think one of the reasons that we let us have a conversation is taking a generic search experience across the university's publicly accessible student data for onboarding and moving them through their student journey or through the student portal, and typically curated documents that student advisors would have to help the students through their journey sits in different places, but it's all electronic. And if you had to do a normal search, you'd get 10, 15 blue links, and you click through and try and figure out what you got out of it. What we've done with the generative AI is put it on top of that data, grounded in that data, and said these are the only sources, only answer questions related to it, and is able to then generate a single response, well formatted, with citations, instead of giving you 10 links and leaving you up to the next 5 or 10 minutes trying to figure out which is the best for you. And that is a massive experience change for a student, because it's quite a natural thing to ask a question in natural language, and also gives you a beautiful student journey. So it's not a difficult thing to find my student advisor, or where the medical facilities, or where the best sushi is on campus even.
So when you think the term artificial intelligence, in that case, it really gives you a sense of that intelligence, and that the way that I'm asking the question, I'm getting an answer that I would get from a person who knows the answer. That's more the style of answer that I'm getting, that, you know, an explanation of, to find the good sushi, you want to go down that way and then across there, rather than sort of a list of information that comes back in a kind of traditional search. It's much more, I'm talking to someone that's grounded in the kind of knowledge that I want, and they're able to answer the question in plain language.
Another big benefit is when we talk to a person, say if I had to ask Johnson where the best sushi is in the CBD, he would say you should get it from this place. And then I could say, well, how do I get there? And he would then direct me through that. With the generative AI, because you can now look at the question and the answer, you can then reason over both of those and predict the next question. So now it's actually become conversational, but not conversational, it's actually prompting as well. Once again, it's prompting on the data that you started with. So it's not some random conversation flying off. It's actually giving you an intelligent next step. And that's typically one of the places where we have a little blank box and we don't know what to type next or what to ask. Or we don't even think of asking a question that might be related to the original question. So those type of things are completely changing the way we're actually able to work with data, not only from a speed point of view, but from an accuracy point of view as well.
I know simply on Google, when I type in a question, I see other people's questions pop up. You know, you see the list of other keywords that have been used before. In comparison to that, using one of the AI-driven education platforms, and putting content in there around pedagogy and teaching and learning, or student data, and then anonymous, of course, and then asking questions about that data set and seeing above the question bar, how about you ask this question? How about you ask this question? Would you like to know more about this? And those driving questions based on my previous questions, which is training the AI platform, the language model, to look at the data and think, anticipate. And I like that sense of anticipation. I think that's really helpful and really creative, because it's basically text, but it's helping me anticipate and think about how I can go deeper. I find that to be incredibly valuable. I'm wondering about some tools that you might be using that you could share with us. For those of us in education, we may not be aware of some of the tools out there that we could use to do the types of things that you're talking about.
There's a bunch of we obviously ChatGPT. It's the original one, and it still does magical things. Obviously there's a price point when there's certain features need to be enabled. You need to pay a little bit more. That's fine. I still find ChatGPT, especially GPT-4 Turbo, is an amazing tool to work with. One of the tools that we're finding is really accessible in the business sector, and this includes education, is I'm sure you're aware, Microsoft have partnered with OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, and they've reimagined their Bing search engine, and they've renamed it copilot.microsoft.com. And this uses GPT-4 in the background as well. If you're an institution that has a Microsoft account, you then are able to use that. It's available to anybody that you don't have a Microsoft. If you have a Microsoft account, you log in. You're able to use that in protected mode. So you know that what you're asking is not going to be used to retrain the model. But that's not their business. Their business is to provide services, not to build LLMs. where that's something that OpenAI do. So we find that to be quite a useful tool because it provides you with a secure space where you know what you're asking is going to be potentially retrained. And also it uses Bing's index as a citation source. So when you change your prompt from give me a recipe for, and my chicken noodle soup is my favorite one to ask for, it will give you a recipe with a citation to where it got it from. But if you say create a recipe, it'll then go and create a recipe for the fly, so you won't get a citation. So starting to use those tools is really great. And the fact that it's grounded data from an academic's point of view, to be able to know that I have a link I can go to, and a citation I actually drill down to validate the information, for me, that's gold. And there's something ChatGPT doesn't do, and it's great. It's not designed to do that. It's not its purpose. But with that, it makes a huge difference. And then obviously from there, there's a couple of really cool creation tools working with things like Midjourney. I still think is a great image generator. Microsoft's got a great set of tools in their designer tool that do stuff similar to that as well. And I think the last one on my side would be, I think when it comes to working with data sets, that's something that's just available. ChatGPT, the paid version for being able to throw up a spreadsheet and say, analyze this and start running data through that is just fantastic.
Yeah, and I think there's so much scope in education with these sorts of tools that, I mean, one, Greg, that you referred to almost becoming like a coach. If we add in the context of that grounding data being context about my learning, then we're able to have the AI getting to the point where it's going to be able to say, okay, I can spot where you're having difficulty in this topic, and let's focus some more questions and exercises on that. But one of the example that we've been working with one of the universities, it's essentially when you talk about grounding the data, we're creating a bucket into which we put the data that we want to be relevant. That's the data about the university's website, plus other grounding, maybe a glossary of terms and things like that to train the model. But that bucket, you could also use, you could have a different bucket for a particular paper or a degree into which you start to do that grounding of the data for that paper. And you have the glossary, you have the training, and then you can create a more localized AI that is as a helper for this paper of the university course. So that's something that we've seen, but that's the kind of possibilities that you have. I think as it gets more grounded then in the student's learning experience too, then it will be able to feedback based off not only the grounding data there, but the grounding data of the student. So that's going to be interesting.
Well, the technologies that ChatGPT or OpenAI produced in their last update was the ability to create your own GPT. So give it, and it's all natural language build as well. You don't have to go into the background and build your GPT. You can go through effectively using AI to build AI. So Terminator was right. They are going to take over. So to be able to build your own GPT, ground it on your system, message and intent, and ground on your own data, and then publish it out for consumption. We're seeing that now that's available through OpenAI's paid subscription. But there seems to be a very strong trend that what OpenAI do gets adopted by the OpenAI partners like Microsoft, etc. So I think in the future, we could potentially have a scenario where you could go to a space in your enterprise data and say, right, I have this library in SharePoint, Dropbox, wherever it might be, and say, right, build the GPT around this data only and publish it as that and make it consumable, which means you can then start publishing your own GPTs out against the data that you've curated as well. I think Google are doing that to a certain degree.
Yes, there's a quite cool tool that I'm playing with actually at the moment. I love tools like OneNote that I've used for things like research, because I can dump a whole lot of unstructured rich text in there and then move things around, make notes. There's a Google tool that's called Notebook LM that it's only available in the US, but if you use a VPN to say you're in the US, you can spin up a new Google profile and then access Notebook LM. And it really lets you create a new notebook which has its own bucket into which you can put that data to ground the model. And then you can start asking questions about that and then pinning notes to a board. So it's like a board where you're researching your topic. Part of that's through asking questions about all the sources that you've created in the past, whether it's your own notes you've taken or an article text that you wanted to paste in there, or a PDF or a Google Drive folder full of information that you've got on that topic. So you've really gotten a quick engine through which you can interact with all those previous notes you have, and the ability to pin notes to a board and drag them around and figure out how you're going to organize your thoughts and write your article. So that's going to be I think that's a great example of something that's been created with an author, so created with a best-selling author in the way that they wanted a tool to work to help them do their research. So I think that's going to be quite a useful example of how you can approach knowledge work with the help of AI.
Fantastic. So for an institution or a school particularly that has not launched into AI really fully, maybe considering what's our first step or our next steps, what would you suggest?
I'll go first. I think one of the things that we need to just realize and not try and, as my MD says, stick our heads in the sand and hope it goes away, is that this isn't going away. And we know that because the amount of investment technology companies are making. This is not just a big bet, it's the bet. So it's teaching people how to use generative AI effectively. It's the same way we taught people how to do things when cell phones came out, also mobile phones, and using the internet more effectively, doing effective Google searches. So there will be systems in place. We're already seeing it across the board with all the different vendors to provide AI that is secure and is following good practices. So it's not trying to rule the world, to be straightforward. It's then teach people how to prompt correctly and ask the AI questions, make sure they understand what it's going to do. I think one of the lessons learned with projects recently is there's this expectation, and I call it Star Trek syndrome, where Captain Kirk always says, "Computer, make me a gin and tonic," and something appears magically. AI is not right every single time. And it's not because it's not a good system, but it's grounded in information, and it's as good as the data a human has put in there, and it's as good as the question you're going to ask.
Right.
So teaching people that, and also managing the expectation that right now, where it sits from a technology point of view, it's a great start to a blank piece of paper, and it's a great way of getting a first draft, but it's not the end all. And if you use it that way, it's going to be incredibly effective. I mean, my daughter's 10 years old. She loves to use it to generate pictures. That's her thing. She likes to use it to generate stories that reads back to her, or I can read back to her at night. And that's getting her used to what it does. But so I think that's a great start, is adopting it and then teaching people how to use it effectively.
Nice. Jonathan, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing in our work with universities and other organizations is that there's probably a good appreciation when we start talking to them of the fact that you don't have to boil the ocean to start with. You can start pretty quickly and simply. And so, for example, we do quite a lot. We accomplish quite a lot in 8 hours working with an institution to say, hey, what happens if we connect up your website and some of your help documentation and some other things to a model? Actually less than 8 hours, right? We can spin them right up, and the tools are so good now that you can spin up a simple model in probably half an hour, so it's a really good entry point for an organization to say, okay, well, can we make things like the website so much easier to use because we can provide a chat interface through which people can use natural language and find answers? So that's a nice quick start. And then there are other ways that they can start looking at things like, well, if we create a connector to talk to this service over here, it's looking at not only the asking for questions and asking questions and finding answers, it's also looking at the scenarios of, well, how could we save a student time?
Right.
So maybe allow them to create something or start something. There's those different levels of quick start and then more actions they can take over time. But it's kind of a ongoing journey. It's not a you do one big implementation project. I think AI is going to be more like you can do lots of small things at a time.
Right. Well, Troy and Jonathan, I really want to thank you for your time and really appreciate what you've shared on case studies and ideas for schools to move forward. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks very much. We appreciate your time, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.